Okay, so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to take a look at a couple things. One is going to be a multimeter and what a multimeter actually is and how we use it. And we're not going to look at all the different things a multimeter can do because we're going to learn more and more about this the more we get into these projects. But right now we're just looking at the basics. So a multimeter by default, I'm going to turn it off here. So we've got, now here's a thing. All of the multimeters, every single one of them, even for the same company, they're all different. They all work different. They all do the same things, but they're different about the way they go about doing it. So you're going to have to get a multimeter and learn how to actually use the one that you have. Some of the stuff that I'm talking about here will be a little different. I own 3 of these things, and all 3 of them are different, and 2 of them are from this company. So learn the multimeter that you have and kind of go from there. But in this particular multimeter, you'll notice that we have voltage here in this side, and then we have amps over here. That's the A. And then over, and really for right now, those are the 2 things that we're going to talk about. We're not going to get into all the other stuff. So what we're wanting to do right now is we want to see how a circuit board, how this particular board works. Now, we mentioned earlier, you can kind of see the paths in that particular circuit board, which helps a little bit, but we still don't really know how the switch works and what exactly is going on. Now, I've already explained to you in the previous video how this thing works, but I want to show you how I went through and made sure that that's exactly what was going on. And so what we're going to do is, you'll notice every multimeter has a resistance thing on it, and this particular meter has, it looks like a little sound thing, and that's basically what it is. It's a resistance that's going to run, but it beeps at me to let me know that I have a connection. So essentially what this is doing, so we're going to turn it around over there, and then I'm just going to set this down. We don't really need the meter at this point because we're not interested in how much resistance we have. We're only interested in the fact that we have a connection, because that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to see, you know, for example, I told you that the 2 outside pins are connected when this switch is not pushed down, and then when you push it down, it connects those other 2. Well, how do I know that it's doing that, and how do I know that the power goes up here to this diode and the negative only goes to this center pin? Well, let's see how I figured that stuff out, because as an example, there is no visible trace on this board that shows me where the negative is going. So I had to use the multimeter to figure that out. So what we're going to do, and it's going to be a little bit difficult here doing it on the desk like this, but what we're going to do is I'm going to hold, or I'm going to try to hold. So this is the negative line on the board. So we're going to try to hold that there. And then what I did is I went through here and I started touching the ends of the different resistors and touching the ends of these poles. And then eventually, let's see, I'm not holding it on there good. This is going to be a little tricky here. But eventually, I got the connector. So when I touch that connector right there, I can see that there is a connection between that connector and the negative pin. And so nothing else is connecting to those things. You got that because I touched the end here, but nothing else is touching. It's only this pin and the negative. That tells me that only the center pin on that switch is going to the negative. Well, if I switch over here to the state side, we've got connection, 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 connection. So the fact that these 2 pins are connected tells me that when this switch is open, these 2 pins are touching each other. The ants can run through and get all the way over here. We can also see that if I touch up here, there's a little bit of power that goes through these probes in order for it to tell whether or not you have any resistance. I mean, what the resistance is. And so by me touching the side of this LED, it lights it up a little bit. And that's because there is a little bit of electricity that runs through my probes that it's kind of seeing there and making that light up. So now if we go over here to the positive side of this thing, you'll notice that the positive only goes to right here. The reason is because there's not enough power going through my probe to get through this diode over here, and there's nothing on the other side of it for me to measure. So I don't have any connection for the positive except to right here at this point. But if you go through the entire circuit, because these two, the positive and the state, are both connected through these resistors and this diode, as well as this connection that goes around the top of the diode, they're all one channel, and that's what I drew out in the red earlier. So now let's take a look at this switch. So if I hold this probe here, so if we hold that probe there, let me see if I can get the camera to focus a little bit here. So we hold the probe there and we touch this outside probe over here. Hopefully you can hear that on the microphone, but it's beeping at me. So it lets me know that those two are connected. Now, if I push the switch down and touch it, you'll notice there is no sound, but if I touch the center one, now it's connected. If I let go, it's not connected. If I touch it, it is connected. And you can see back there in the background, no connection, and it's connected. And then if I touch over here, I'm connected on the outside probe there. Push it down, I'm not connected. So that tells me that when I push this switch, the connection is going from here to here. Now, another interesting thing just to know was that I wanted to make sure that this leg over here didn't have some ulterior motive other than just being connected through the switch. So the switch has 3 prongs on it. And so what I did is I know that prong and this prong here are connected. But what I wanted to do is make sure that none of the other stuff on the board was connected through that thing as well. And so the assumption is that because these two guys end up getting connected, the 2 outside pins, through the switch, that this pin ends up being connected to all of the board, but it is not connected to anything else. So in other words, if I push this switch and then I touch this outside probe and then touch everything on the board, nothing lights up. Nothing has any kind of sound or anything to let me know that they're connected. So this outside pin is part of the switch, and therefore it's soldered onto the board, but there's actually not any connections going to it to any other part of the board. It's only these 2 pins here that are being used in this particular circuit. And so the point to this is not really to get into a lot of detail on this board because we've already gone through it, but I just wanted to introduce you to a multimeter and explain how invaluable it is to actually have one of these things, because without one you really don't have a good way to tell whether or not a circuit is doing a certain thing that you're expecting it to do. So a multimeter is something that you absolutely are going to have in the home or in the classroom in order to do these exercises. So I'd highly recommend getting one. And again, I'm not going to recommend any particular brand or, anything like that, because every single one of them is different. This particular multimeter is pretty expensive, so you probably don't want one of these. And it's also a bit complicated for the kids to use because it's got a whole lot of functions and stuff that it does. So there really isn't a reason to get anything big like this. I'd probably get, smaller units. You do want to get a digital one though. Don't get the little analog ones with the needles. They're too cheap and not accurate enough to do some of the projects that we're going to be doing. So multimeters, very important, very handy, and highly recommended.